Hey, this is Sammy Bowler, and you're listening to the Nebula Music Podcast.
All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. I'm not going to bore you with a big-ass intro because I'm excited to kind of get down into this. If you haven't joined us before, though, this is a show where we talk to some of the coolest, most inspiring musicians or anyone who's doing something really cool in the music industry. We have them on the show so that we can pick their brain for a little bit. And today is no exception because we have a very talented musician who's done a lot, who, when you watch him play, will blow you away within, I don't even know, like the first 5-10 seconds at how good this man is. And I don't want to waste a lot of time. I just want to get right into it, pick his brain for a little bit. I have Mr. Sammy Bowler joining us today. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Eddie. It's nice to meet you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. It's actually an honor to have such a talented musician like yourself on the show, because I've seen your videos now, and I don't know, like there's something to your virtuosity that really blows me away. You are so comfortable with the way you play. You seem to know exactly what you want to get out of that instrument, which to someone like me, I'm a drummer, by the way. And even though I've been around the instrument for a while, I feel like there's still some moments where I don't know what the fuck I'm doing and then things just sort of come out. But when I watch you play, it just seems like you're 100% in control, man. And my hat's off to you, because that's pretty fucking cool.
Thank you. That's so nice, man. Thank you so much. That really means a lot. I mean, I still feel like I feel the same way, man, where it's, you know, some days you feel like you've got a handle on it, and then the next day you're like, you know, you feel like you don't know any, you know, you can't even play the thing. So I wish that would go away at some point, but I feel like it's, you know, that's part of the lifelong, you know, musician struggle, I guess.
You know,
but
actually,
yeah, everybody goes through that, bro.
You ever think of any of the like legendary musicians that we can think of at the top of our heads? Like, I'm trying to think of like guitarists, but maybe like John Mayer, Eric Clapton. You ever think that went away at some point? Because those are people that I feel like we can consider probably at the top tier list for guitarists in the mainstream, I guess you can say. You ever think that goes away for people like that?
I don't know. You know, it's different for everybody. It's like you'd have to ask them. You know, I'm sure. I think John would say the same. John would probably say the same thing, though. You know, like I know he's one of those people that still practices all the time, still, you know, strives. He's always trying to come up with new stuff. Which he's one of my favorite guitar players, man. I think he's just amazing.
I know, man. Some of the stuff that those guys can pull off are insane. But I want to dive into some of your stuff that you've been doing. But before we do so, I have been taking some time just to explore a little bit about what's been happening, just because I do feel like it's important. And even though at the recording of this interview, I feel like we're at the end of it, of what we have called this year like a pandemic and all that. Fingers crossed that this is, you know, over and we can move on from this. But I do think it's important to talk about how, as musicians, we've been handling this whole entire year, because it's been incredibly difficult for musicians, especially. Like, the industry is shut down, no live shows, none of that. So I have just been exploring how different people have been handling it. Some people loved it. Some people have been incredibly creative. Some people hate being at home, you know, like a whole bunch of different stuff. But I do find that talking about it helps others, you know, get their creativity up and continue doing what they love doing. So I'm curious for you, how has this pandemic been for you?
It's been an interesting year, to say the least. I think for a lot of people, you know,
no one saw it coming, man. No one saw this coming.
Yeah, nobody thought it would last this long. That's for sure. Yeah, it's been weird. Like I haven't spent this much time at home straight in such a long time, you know, without being on the road. So it's been interesting. I miss playing live so much, you know. But you know what, man, I've managed to keep busy. Like I feel really lucky. Like I live alone, and like when you're a musician, you kind of end up spending you get used to being by yourself, you know, working on stuff anyway. So it's like, I felt unusually okay with everything, you know, and some of my friends were like, oh my God, I can't stand being here. You know, I can't spend any more time inside. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've gotten to explore like some things that maybe I wouldn't have if I was just, you know, in my regular routine. So it's a blessing, man. I mean, being a musician, it's like one day at a time anyway. So that's kind of how I've been treating it.
Yeah, I love that attitude when it comes to just attacking life in that way, where it's just spontaneous. You just kind of do whatever you can as best as you possibly can that day. I'm wondering, before the pandemic, did you find yourself at a point where because you've kept yourself pretty busy, like you do a lot of different things. Not only do you record and perform and do a lot of clinics and things of that nature, you're just an incredibly busy guy. And so I'm wondering, before the pandemic, did you start seeing yourself getting to a point where you couldn't I guess you can say like practice or spending enough time like you normally would do by yourself? Because this is something that I do see a lot as a musician tends to kind of evolve and get a little bit better and, more successful. There's less time to work on stuff. And some people don't mind it. Some people do. For you specifically, I'm just wondering, where were you at before all this went down?
Interesting question, man. Yeah, it's funny. For me, like the main thing is like I always try, like if I'm picking up a guitar, if I'm picking up a guitar, the usual thing I do every day is just try to come up with something new, like write a little new piece. That's kind of my routine. Everybody's different when, as far as like practicing goes and all that. But I mean, for me, I think like if you're on the road, inevitably like when I first started touring, I thought, oh man, I'm gonna have all this time, I'm gonna practice all the time, but of course, as soon as you start traveling, it's just not like that. Like you end up, I don't know where all the time goes,
Yeah.
But no, man, I was home, like I was kind of planning on going on tour, for the first time, last summer under my own name, like doing instrumental stuff. My album actually came out like the first week of the lockdown, which was really interesting because,
Whoa.
yeah, it was a bummer, man. It was like, well, okay, everybody's at home listening to music, so this is, nobody's really released music before in a pandemic before, so nobody knew it was going to happen, but it was nuts, man. Yeah, but yeah, now we're a year later, but it's cool because everything's starting to get back to normal. It's like there's been even this week, so many shows have been announced, so many tours. So
I know
there's light at the end of the tunnel, man.
There is light at the end of the tunnel. That's one thing I'm happy for, because I feel like a month or two ago, it was still very much, up in the air. And right now we're recording this in May. So whenever this comes out, that way it's a point of reference. But I do remember like back in February and March, there were rumors that things opening up a little bit. And then now I think it's just solidified. There's festival after festival after festival. And I think everyone is super excited. One of the things that I'm curious about with what you were saying a little bit earlier, as you're touring and you're kind of working on stuff, I guess I'm wondering, you specifically, before we get into like your history and how you got started, when you practice, do you just kind of do whatever you want, or is there a specific routine that you kind of go through? Because again, when I watch you play, it seems like you know what you're doing and you're very confident in what you're playing. And that is something that's always fascinated me about virtuosic people like you, who just know what they're doing all the time, is the routine can vary very differently across the board. Some people are very they do theory and scales and they have like a very structured practice session. There's other people who just like, I don't know, I heard it in my head and I'm just going to try and figure out what I heard in my head. Where do you fall in that spectrum?
Yeah, man, everybody's different when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Me personally, like I've never really been like a regimented, practicer. Like what I mentioned is the main thing I do is like I just try to play as much as I can every day, trying to just come up with something new. Like my main I guess exercise or whatever is you pick up a guitar and you just start playing, right? This is like how I write a lot of my stuff. And the trick is you don't pause at all. You don't let yourself stop. Really? And then like if you start playing, once you go like 20 minutes of that, you start to get to this thing where it's like you're not thinking about anything. You're almost like watching yourself play, and it becomes a little bit easier to like pick out like an interesting, little riff or whatever that you can kind of jump off of and turn into a song. So that's kind of my routine. I definitely, when I was young, I definitely spent a lot of years doing, like real technical, like studying, like what you said, like music theory and real technical exercise. Yeah, I spent years doing that, man. But now it's like, as you grow up, it's like the reasons why you play and like the stuff that keeps you excited changes, just like anything. So that's kind of my routine. Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that's kind of my routine now is I'll just play. That's usually what I start out doing is I'll just play without pausing for, however long. And then when you find something that's cool, you try to expand on it.
Interesting. So when you say that you just kind of play without pausing, is there still like some sort of goal though? Like you kind of like go through some riffs and some scales and whatnot. And the reason why I'm asking this is I remember, being younger when, like you basically mentioned, when you're younger, you kind of need, in my opinion, you kind of need that structure of like what to practice. And then at a certain point, you tend to branch off and kind of do your own thing. But I remember for me specifically, there never really was an obvious moment of when to do that, when to actually branch off and do your own thing. And so for you specifically, I'm kind of wondering how you came up or how you ended up in that place where you were just comfortable with just playing whatever you wanted, because I do feel like there's like this leap sometimes. Sometimes it can be a struggle to gain confidence as a musician to believe that what you're working on is working to some extent. So, and obviously for you it is. So I'm curious, was that like a very conscious choice, like from now on I'm just going to practice what I want, or gradually it just became that way, if that makes sense?
You're totally right, man. I think for me, like, as far as like when I was a young kid, like learning how to play guitar, learning about music, the main thing I studied was like learning songs and learning records, like mostly by ear. And I just spent years and years doing that, like, through like middle school and high school. Just if I heard a song that I really loved, I just try to get it. I try to get it exactly like the record, Yeah. And if you do, that's really good practice. Like when you're learning how to play, like the technical stuff of any instrument. Drums, same thing, man. Like transcribing a whole song, transcribing a whole record, like that teaches you more than just like learning, out of a book or something. But it also is like equally important, I think. Once you have some songs down and you feel confident in playing them, I think it's equally important to go back and kind of figure out, like the theoretical why this stuff works, and figure out what you're actually doing. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. Like I pretty much played by ear until I got to high school. And then when I got to high school, the orchestra director of my school, his name was Peter Tolius. He was a classical guitarist. So he kind of got me into like, he's like, okay, you can play already, but you gotta figure out what you're doing. You can't just just be wailing away on the thing with, no idea what you're doing. So that's when I started studying like the more technical aspects of it. But as far as your question is like, when it goes from like being like a,
structured practice to
or like a student of the instrument as opposed to like trying to become more of like a songwriter and stuff like that, I'd say I think the biggest thing for me is when I got in like my first band and started writing music. That's when it kind of flipped for me and kind of went away from like, all right, transcribing and learning other people's stuff to, all right, who am I, and that's a different thing. That's a different thing, man. It's like, I think the biggest difference is like, the latter or the former is like as like an external thing, like you're pulling all these things from outside, all your favorite records, you're learning Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, shit like that. But then like when you start writing songs, it's more of an internal thing. It's like you go inside and it's figuring out who you are. And that's the amazing thing about music, man, is like the journey as a musician. It's like it's figuring out who you are. That's what being an artist is, of anything, is knowing who you are.
Yeah, and that is very beautifully put. Shout out to your teacher, Peter. Peter, what was the last name?
Tolius is his name.
Tolius. If you end up watching this, shout out to you, because I think it's very important whenever someone in our life kind of points us in a really good direction and we tend to run with it. I think it's a very important moment. And I do think it's those kind of moments deserve a shout out. But one thing that you said that I found very interesting, and I see this in a lot of people's careers, and I'm very lucky where I get the opportunity to not just talk to instrumentalists, but bands and all sorts of facets of the industry. And one thing that I do find, there is this I don't want to say divide, it's just a very organic split of what happens to the musician mindset. And maybe, I don't know if we're going to come up with an answer or not, but it's interesting and fun to explore these concepts. But one thing you said is, you're a student of the instrument, and then at some point when you started writing music, something switched where you were trying to figure out who you were musically, like what's coming out from within. And I find that a lot of people like you immediately grab onto that, no matter where they're at in terms of their skill level. Once you start writing music, there's this sort of language that you're trying to speak. And then there's this other group of people that don't. There's this other group of people that immediately almost expand that idea of being the student of the instrument. Once they start songwriting, they start to be like, okay, well, who are the legendary songwriters? I need to sound like them. I need to like follow these rules to the T. And it becomes almost like an extension to that instrument learning that we were talking about. So that's where I find the interesting aspects. That there's people that go both ways, and you went the more natural way, I guess. In my opinion, do you feel like that has something to do with your personality? Or do you feel like that has something to do with like musical maturity or confidence and just wanting to say things? I don't know if what I'm asking is making sense, but does that make sense? Like, what do you think helped you just want to figure out what you had to say versus other people who go down a more structured path of like, okay, here's what a song is. Let me emulate that, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I totally get it. I'd say, the beautiful thing is like both, what other path you take is equally as beautiful, or equally as valid or whatever. Like there's a lot of wonderful guitar players, a lot of amazing musicians that don't write their own stuff, like that's, and that's just as awesome because like at the end of the day, the reward of playing an instrument is being able to play for yourself and the enjoyment, like that. I think, that's one thing that kind of gets forgotten a lot. I think it's like it should be fun. Like playing guitar is fun. Playing rock and roll is fun. It should always. That's always got to be number one. Like as soon as it starts to become a drag, I always tell guitar students and stuff like, take a break, man. It's like it should always be enjoyable. I think for me, one specific thing I remember, like when I started getting into songwriting. And it kind of touches on what we were talking about a second ago, but when I used to play in a band called Citizen Zero, that was like my first band, and we started working with this great producer named Al Sutton. He's a big producer in Detroit. He's like a rock producer here.
Shout out to Al.
Al's great. Yeah. He's a really good friend of mine, man. But anyway, when I first met him, I was like 19 and like I was just just dropping out of college and all this shit, like when you get in your first band, that's exciting, but yeah. He was kind of like the first one to tell me, because I'd never really written a lot of music before or anything. But I remember him telling me once, it's like, it's awesome. You can, it's cool. You can, play this or that, blah, blah, blah. But, who are you? You know what I mean? Like that's a totally different thing. Nobody had ever said that to me before. It's funny. It's like you spend all these years studying music, but then nobody, that's like really like the kind of like the most basic question if you think about it. Right. As far as like songwriting, it's like you have to. Now it's time to like kind of like what I mentioned, like go within and dig deep and start working on your own sound. So I think that's kind of like what made me kind of make us kind of switch in my mind a little bit, but not to say that like the study of an instrument is lifelong as well. I think it's just I don't spend as much time now like practicing scales and shit like that. Even though I probably should, to be honest. But
I mean, I think we all should. I mean, there's not many scales you can practice on drums, but there's a lot of rudiments you can practice on drums. And I find that the better you get, or not the better you get, but the busier you get, the harder it is to practice, and the harder it is to spend a lot of that time where you normally would have just kind of studying the instrument and seeing what you can do with it. I also do think that it depends on what your goals are too, because there's a lot of musicians who once they reach a certain point of their career gets busy and they're either touring or doing clinics or producing or whatever. Sometimes they're like, I'm good. I think I know enough. Obviously I don't know everything, but I know enough to do what I want to do. And then if I ever need to learn something, I'll learn it when the time comes. Is that ever crossed your path at all? Or have you always been hungry to some extent to like learn new things? Because again, and maybe I know the answer because you're a clinician and you are a virtuosic guitarist. So I do feel like you're kind of at the forefront of what we consider breakthrough guitar playing. But I don't know. I'm wondering if you've ever gone to a point, maybe in the past, where you were like, maybe I already know enough for what I need to do. And then at some point I'll revisit this. I don't know. Has that ever crossed your path?
Thanks so much, man. For me, like I'm always trying to find something new. Like I never want to just like, I don't know. It's an interesting thing about writing music as well. It's like you don't want to just repeat yourself all the time. At least for me, like I'm starting to write my second instrumental record right now, and that's one thing I'm trying to be really conscious of is like not just making the first album again, like doing the same thing twice. So for that, especially if you're doing like your own solo, like especially instrumental music, it's like for me, I'm always trying to find something new. And one way I do that, it's like if I hear myself doing something I've done before, I'll try to do the exact opposite, Or another good little trick that I found for coming up with new stuff, and you can use it on any instrument, is like kind of combining techniques. Ooh. And sometimes if you do that, you can come up with some interesting sounds, or maybe just for yourself, like trying to, maybe coming up or hearing something in your playing that you've never done before, like maybe combining like guitar tapping with a slide or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like whatever techniques you have, or on drums you could do a lot of different stuff, you know, maybe something you play on the toms, you try it on the kick, you know what I mean? Like little things like that. That's one thing I kind of do when I feel like I'm in a rut or something.
Yeah. And I that's a very good approach. I do feel like naturally when you combine those elements, you can come up with really new stuff. As you're creating this new album of yours, I'm wondering, because it's instrumental, I do feel like it falls into like a different playing field than other like traditional, more like pop music or whatever. I'm wondering, when it comes to instrumental music, in your experience as you're writing the second album, do you find it more difficult to write new stuff just because you, like you mentioned, you're trying to not write the same thing over and over again. You're not trying to write the same album. And I don't think any artist is ever trying to do that. But I do find that sometimes with pop music or just other like more, I don't know what you would call it, just like singer-songwriter, whatever, there are these formats where you can kind of analyze what's going on and then maybe change little things here and there, and then you have a brand new song. But when it comes to instrumental stuff, a lot of it is you. A lot of it is just the themes that you can come up with in your head, and you structure it the way you want. I would imagine, or I would guess, and this could be a completely wrong guess of mine, uneducated, but I would imagine that sometimes, maybe accidentally, you might start repeating some of the similar musical themes that you would have in the past. I'm wondering, do you find it difficult to be 100% unique the second time around? Or maybe there were some moments where you made a song and then you heard it, you're like, oh my God, that sounds exactly like that other song I made, a year or two ago, and then you have to rewrite it. I don't know. I'm kind of wondering, in your perspective, how difficult is it to make a completely 100% different second album that is different enough from the first one that you made?
That's a great question. I wish I knew how to answer it. I feel like I'm doing that for the first time. This is my first time doing a second record, so I'll get back to you in 6 months. No, I'm just kidding. For me, I think the best thing is to bounce it off your friends. Like I'm really lucky. Like I like working with a producer. Like my best friend like produces my stuff. His name's Steve Lane, and he plays bass in my band. And he's having somebody that you can really trust musically to bounce ideas off of is really important. Even if it's like your own album or like your like quote unquote like solo stuff or whatever, having somebody that you trust and will tell it to you straight. I think that's a really, while you're working on it, you know what I mean? I think that's a really important just thing to have in your life, because a lot of the time, every songwriter, I'm sure you can attest to this too. It's like when you're working on something, for me, like I write most of my stuff at night. So like I'll be working on a demo and jamming it and going, yeah, this is it, and then you wake up the next day and go, oh my God, this sucks. Yeah. Everybody who's ever written a song has that's happened to,
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is, if you have somebody that you can bounce your stuff off of, you can, I don't know, it's like the music becomes clearer and clearer while you're writing it. If you have like, a friend or two that will listen to it and give you an honest opinion.
That's actually really good advice. Always having that ear that you can bounce things off. When I experience that is because I'm a producer, and I feel like there's so many times where I've mixed something and I think it sounds great. And then the next day I come back and it sounds like absolute horseshit. Just like, God damn it, the bass is too loud. Why did I think this sounded great yesterday? And it is the whole ear fatigue thing is absolutely real, where you just, when you listen to the one thing over and over again, it just kind of, you get null to it. You get like just too neutral to it. And then you come back to it sometime later and you're like, you either love it, you either think it's better than you thought, or you absolutely hate it. You think it sounds like shit. It is the funniest thing when you do that. But
dude, mixing's tough, man. Yeah, I could never mix my own stuff. I wouldn't even feel comfortable mixing anybody else's stuff, I don't think. Just because it's it's funny about like growing up a little bit. Like I feel like when you first start working on your stuff, it's more, you're really, really particular, Yeah. But for me, it's like the more I've recorded and worked in studios and stuff, it's like I've learned to get over some of that, like being, oh God, if it was just like a little bit, this or that, like.
It's hard, man. It's hard to get over.
It's really hard. It's really hard. But if you can, you'll feel a lot better because then you're not listening to the stuff you put out 6 months ago going, oh God, I want to revise this or whatever,
Yeah.
But for me, it's like if I'm digging it and I can listen to it and nothing really nothing really bothers me, then it's like, all right, we're on the right track. It's cool.
Well, can I pick? I don't know. Like, I don't know if we're gonna have an answer to this, but I'm generally curious what you think about this. I love talking to different people from different kinds of walks of life, and I am again very lucky that I've gotten the chance to talk to so many different kinds of people, not just musicians. But one thing I've picked up on in my few years of doing this, I feel like when it comes to music, in general, musicians and songwriters and just people in music tend to be a lot pickier than other creative outlets. Like, for example, painting or design or even film. Even though film, I do agree it's kind of up there too. I find that it is a lot, those people involved in those careers tend to be a little bit more lenient on themselves than musicians in general. And that is something that's always boggled my mind. Why is it that as musicians, on average, when you play something, I would argue that there's a bigger chance of you hating what you played than loving it. And obviously, as you mature, you kind of understand that. But I do find like when someone's a painter or something else, they do a piece and even they may not like it, but there is this sort of, I don't know. I feel like to them, it's a little bit easier to let go of that. And obviously I'm speculating here. I could be absolutely wrong, but this is just based off my own experience. And so in your opinion, I'm just wondering, why do you think as musicians, it's very common and more common than other industries for us to like be so fucking picky on what we make?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think the right way.
I don't even think there is a right answer, to be honest, man.
Yeah, just the right way to phrase it. I think, man, like when in any artistic field or endeavor, it's a direct reflection of who it's a direct reflection of who you are, the way you play, the stuff you write. But it's not the equivalent of like your self-worth. Like I know so many, and I think that kind of gets down to like what you're asking. Like so many people, they feel like their self-worth is tied to like their last performance or whatever, the last song is, or they have a bad night. It's like it's the end of the world, but I don't know. It's like as you grow up or something, or I think it's just growing up, and I think it's just growing up is the way to put it. You become like less and less. For me, it's like if I just want to do my best, and if I did my best and I enjoyed the gig or I enjoyed writing, if I enjoyed making the album and it's something I can hit play and enjoy, then I'm happy. Like there's a really famous quote from a classical composer, I think it was Paganini, and this really is what it comes down to is like, in order to move other people, you must be moved first, So it's like, if it moves you and you really dig it and it gets you excited, then you've already won, It's like other people, when they hear your tune or whatever, are going to be way, way more likely to enjoy it because it's honest and you did it with, that's having passion,
Yeah.
So that's something I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer, I guess, but that's kind of that would be my suggestion is like, if you have a bad night, like your self-worth shouldn't be tied to, your performance, there's still being a human being as well,
Yeah. Though I will point out that it seems like you have a good head on your shoulders, meaning that you, just from the minute that I met you, you just seem very relaxed. Like I don't know a lot about your life, but based on what I can tell, you just seem to be at this point where you like what you do, you're enjoying your career, but it doesn't seem like you're too hard on yourself. And I'm wondering, where did that, I don't want to call it leniency. You just seem to understand yourself fairly well. Like you were saying, you grew up in a way, but there are so many people in different age groups, younger and older, who haven't gotten there yet, or maybe never get there. I don't know. But there's even famous examples of people who are very passionate, who are very good at what they do. And to us, they're legends. But to them, they absolutely hate what they make. And again, that's something you see a lot in creativity because it's putting your soul out there. But anyways, I'm curious if you feel like it has anything to do with your personality. Like maybe you are just that type of person who naturally accepts themselves. Or is that something that everybody just has to learn? Like everyone just has to kind of put in the time to get to that point where they can let go a little bit.
Man, yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's different. I know some of my best friends or whatever, or, musicians I've played with in my life. Yeah, it can be so super, super hard on themselves. Can't listen to past performance or whatever. Which I understand. I think that can be really useful, like being really hypercritical of what you do. And I think it's really important. It's really important, especially like when you're learning how to play an instrument or sing or whatever. It's interesting, man. Like I remember watching. There's this great music. One of my favorite movies. This great music documentary called Seymour: An Introduction. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
So like Ethan Hawke did it, the actor, but he was at, long story short, he was like at a dinner party and there was this like 85-year-old piano teacher sitting next to him. And for some reason, Ethan Hawke was struggling with some of the stuff you were talking about, like huge stage fright, never, can't watch anything I've ever done, all the stuff you kind of mentioned. And he started talking to this piano player named Seymour Bernstein, and he gave him like such sage wisdom at this dinner party that Ethan Hawke did this whole documentary on him. So
really?
it's worth checking out. Yeah, I think.
What's it called again? Seymour what?
Seymour: An Introduction is the name of it. But it's like my favorite movie. I've watched it like 6 times. But anyway, there's this one scene in it where Seymour is talking to like one of his young students, and he's talking about playing. Blah, blah, it's cool. And the kid goes, when you learn how to play an instrument, you have to learn to listen so intensely and like with such precision and love that from learning how to listen to yourself play, you learn how to listen to others in a different way as well, because you can pick up so much from really listening to someone and being there, being totally there. And that's, I think, I don't know. Your question kind of reminded me of that movie because a lot of the stuff we're talking about, that's like the whole doc is Seymour Bernstein talking about, his approach. He's an amazing, it's really cool. You'll dig it, man. If you need something to watch, I think it's on, you can find it on like Amazon and stuff.
Dude, I'm thank you for bringing that up. I'm a big fan of documentaries, and anytime someone suggests a really good one to watch, I definitely always write it down, and I'm gonna watch it at some point. But I do feel like that topic is probably more prevalent today than it ever has been, just because of social media and the internet. There's so much access to content, right? And I do think that again, all based on my experience, based on what I've seen, there is on everybody, not just artists, but there is a lot more pressure to be good, I guess you can say, to like be unique or be different and just do something that stands out. And it is interesting that we are talking about this, because I do find that this topic specifically about getting to a point where you can kind of let go and just not necessarily be so hard on yourself. And I bring this up just because we both kind of grew up in the same time, and then I don't know, we had different schooling or whatever, but I do feel like the way I was taught and gauging on the environment around me, it was very, very strict, very like, you got to work really hard and you got to put in that time, and otherwise why are you doing this? But I do find that lately there's been a shift in focus where there is more leniency now. We're like, all right, get to that point where you're good, and then just kind of let go and listen and figure out who you are. I don't know. I'm echoing what you're saying, but I do feel like that is an important topic to talk about, and I do appreciate you sharing your thoughts on it.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah, I forget who said it, but it's called playing music for a reason. It's play, it's fun,
Yeah.
It's not, you don't work music, or you don't. Granted, yeah, it takes a lot of learning any instrument takes a lot of dedication. There's another great book, or there's a great book that I really like that deals with some of this stuff called The Music Lesson. Have you ever heard of that, by Victor Wooten, the bass player?
I mean, I know Victor Wooten, but I haven't heard that book.
His book is phenomenal. I think that's like the best like music education book. It's not like a textbook. It's like a story. It's like a story of him learning how to play.
Really?
It's really good, man. That's worth checking out too, especially if you're traveling, need something to read or something. It's short.
What's it called again?
The Music Lesson.
The Music Lesson. But
he talks a lot about that stuff, about being so, a lot of people are so hard on themselves. It's, you have to, at a certain point, it's like, when you hit the stage, there's nothing, it's a blessing to be a musician, and make, you get to go on stage and entertain people, and, make it, you have an opportunity every time you go on stage to make people happy, and it's like, what could be better than that, so
yeah.
it's yeah, you gotta. I think it's really important to take a step back and enjoy it. But being a musician, I mean, it's like it's a blessing to play an instrument. Even if you're not performing or anything, just the enjoyment of it, is a really special thing.
Yeah, you must do a lot of reading then, huh? You seem like a very well read dude.
I like reading. Yeah, I spend a lot of time alone, man. That's funny. It's like when being a musician, you just have to. I don't know. It's part of it. For me, it's like when I'm trying to come up with something, I kind of have to be by myself. Unless I'm like jamming with my band or right or like just jamming or whatever. But a lot of the time, like the stuff I do comes from sitting around working on stuff.
Yeah, I just random thought. I'm not even sure if you even want to talk about this, but I'm curious. Like, why do you feel like it benefits you to be more on your own than with like a group of people? I mean, I know you have a band, but I do find that lately, based on who I've been talking to, there does seem to be this like not shift, because there isn't a shift. Everyone's different, but I do find that there is more of a desire for people to kind of be more part of a community, a musical community, if you will, that kind of exchanges ideas versus where you're coming from, which is like, I have tons of stuff I got to figure out. There's tons of great musicians like you who really prefer it that way. In a way, I'm kind of that way too, where I just got to be able to sort my own musical thoughts. And once I got them figured out, I can like do them. Having too many cooks in my kitchen is more of a detriment to me. But I'm curious, like in terms of our experience, why do you think it's better, not better, but why do you think people like us prefer to be more alone when it comes to music stuff versus being a part of that like community that I just described? And I'm being very vague on that, but I'm just genuinely curious.
I think both are really important, man. Like, I mean, just personally, like I just like to write stuff when I'm by myself, Like I feel like that's when I get a lot of the work done, is like when I don't have any distractions. That's why I like working at night too, because your buds aren't hitting you up, or your girlfriend or whatever, going, hey, let's go out or whatever. But I think it is also equally really important to play with other people. Like no matter who you're playing with, you can always learn something from them, no matter what level, no matter what, or what the music is. If it's original music, you're playing covers, whatever. There's always something to be learned from whoever you play with. Like for me, I actually like during COVID, I just started a new band. That producer Al that I mentioned earlier, he introduced me to this singer from Kentucky named Cam Clark, and we just started a new band, and we've pretty much got the album written now. But it was an interesting thing because it's like, a mutual friend, goes, hey, I think you guys should meet each other. You might be able to. It seems like it could be a really cool thing if you guys get together and write some stuff, but you don't know what it's going to be until you get in a room, It's like until you get in a room and start playing. You can think about it all you want or go, okay, this is going to be like this, or, we're going to do this riff, blah, blah, blah. But that's the beautiful thing about being in a band is it's the collection of, in this case, like all four guys together, is what makes amazing bands. It's like the individual thing. It doesn't matter individually. It's how coming together as one, what it is. Like one of my a great example of that is like one of my favorite bands is Kings of Leon.
Great band, yeah.
Yeah, I love that band. Individually, none of they're all great musicians, but it's like individually you wouldn't know, especially when they started. Like they were still learning how to play their instruments when the band started, right?
Yeah.
But when the four of them start playing together, it is like it's magic, It's so I love that. That's like a really amazing thing as well, That's probably my favorite thing, man, is being in a band, especially like this new band or whatever is just like my best friends, So that's the best. I think playing music with your friends is the ideal thing, at least for me,
Yeah. I would say that I think playing with your friends is an amazing thing as long as it's working out, like the dynamic. There's so many bands where it's worked out really, really well, and then at some point it doesn't work out well. I'm curious for you when it comes to your musical ideas, because I do feel like we think about musical elements similarly. Like obviously I think we're in different genres, but when it comes to exploring what we have to say in our brains, it's very similar. I'm curious, the dynamic in your group. Clearly it's fun and clearly you're enjoying it and you absolutely love it. And you're right, there is this energetic thing that happens when a group of people get together and they're just expressing music together. There's nothing like it, really. There's nothing like it in the world. And so for you, in your experience, what is your dynamic with your group? Do you find that you're kind of the leader, or do you co-lead, or maybe everyone sort of shares in the songwriting duties or whatever? I don't know. I'm curious.
I think it's best, in my experience. I'm just speaking for myself. As far as bands go, like my favorite thing is playing with people that know that, you know, like they have a I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. The more collaborative, the better, you know. Like yeah. I would never be like, don't play that or something like that. Like I think it's always going to turn out better if people are being themselves, you know. Granted, like when you're in a band, yeah, it's like, especially if you're writing together, like this record we just wrote the past few months, it's like we would just get in a room and start playing, and as soon as somebody did something cool, you go, oh yeah, that's it, play it again, you know, let's play it, you know, and then you get to the next, you know, you get it, and then it falls apart, and you go, okay, what do we do now, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, I think, especially for rock music, that's the way to write a rock record. For if you're playing in a band, it's you write it together, because there's so many rock records now where it's like it just sounds like the singer in a computer or something, you know what I mean? Or like the guys in the band don't even play on the album. That's how like all the great rock and metal stuff that we love, that's how it was written. It's the guys getting together and going, or maybe like one guy had a riff and goes, hey, here we go. You know, James Hetfield goes, here's this riff, and Lars starts playing, you know, it's like, that's how I think that's the best way to, you know, write a rock record, because then it's like, then the record's going to sound like you, it's going to sound like your band, as opposed to like, you know, more of like a put together thing. But granted, everybody's different, you know, that's just my favorite way to do it.
Yeah. You know, I'm curious what you think of this, because I do feel like there is this movement in the rock world, which, you know, music's always changing, no matter where we're at. You know, 30 years from now, you and I both are going to look back at this time, and we're probably going to remember a lot of the songs that we remember, but we're going to be fucking old at that point. I mean, how old are you? I think you're like in your mid-20s, right?
Yeah, I'm 28.
You're 28. Okay, yeah. So I'm 30. So in 30 years, you're going to be 58. I'm going to be 60. We're going to be old fucking farts. But, you know, but I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll have some like youth serum by then. But my point, and that'd be the wish. But my point
I'm never
is,
growing up, man. Wait, no, I'm just kidding.
I joke with my friends, but I say the minute that like cybernetic arms and legs are available, I'm getting some of those.
We're going, yeah.
I want to be that 85-year-old guy who's, you know, fucking running with robotic legs. It's gonna be funny.
I joke with my friends about that. Like, I was telling my friend and bass player Steve, I was like, dude, when we're like, you think we're still gonna be like doing all the same bullshit when we're like, you know, 60, like going to like, you think we're gonna be like going to our kids' ball games and stuff, like, and then still going to the studio and fucking around all day? He's like, definitely, dude. I'm like, man, I hope not. I'm like, if we don't grow up at least a little bit, I think there's gonna be a problem. But no, I'm with you, man. Like, I'm hoping we might just be on the cutoff of age where they start having some serious technological advances. So you never know.
We might be in Mars at that point, you know. It might be a colony.
Yeah, with Elon, dude. Yeah, you never know.
Exactly. You know, one goal to have would be the first band on Mars. Can you imagine that? Like the first concert on Mars. That's got to be something historic.
I think it's cool how they've been like piping songs into space. Have you seen any? I was reading something about that the other day. Where like I think they were playing like Queen or something. They like. Are you talking about the
satellite that they launched a couple years ago, or the ones that?
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that fucking interesting? There's like is it on the Voyager, or there's a satellite that's really far out there that has a collection of music. Queen is on there, like you said. There's a whole bunch of other kinds of music too. What is the goal of that? I think it's just in case someone finds it, they know our culture.
I think it's just cool. Yeah, I think they just think it's cool. I'm sure it's more than that, but yeah, maybe if the aliens hear Bohemian Rhapsody, they'll come looking.
Wait, was it on a CD or was it like on a tape, or do you know at all?
I can't remember. I have to look it up again. That stuff is fascinating, man. That's so cool. I was watching this thing on YouTube the other day, like all the planets in our solar system like resonate at different frequencies, and they've mapped it so you can actually hear the sound of the different planets. I'll send it to you when we go. It was pretty cool.
No shit.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
What is I mean I gotta watch it, but do you know what Earth sounds like? What frequency we rotate at?
I can't. I think it has to do with like the actual size of the planets. Like the larger planets are lower. You know, I'll find it and send it to you.
Yeah, please do. That is, I love space stuff. I mean, if you haven't noticed, the name of this podcast is Nebula Music Podcast. This for a reason. It's because
nice.
it's a horrible name, to be honest with you, but somehow it's stuck with people. And I always tell people that it has to do with space because I love space and I've always dreamt about being an astronaut as a kid. And I still hold on to that dream. Someday I may actually still fly up to space, playing the drums. Who knows? But
there you go. Nice.
Exactly. One of the things I wanted to get at was kind of backtracking a couple minutes was how we talked about computers and how music has changed a little bit. And I do see this new interest in rock music that sort of went away for a good decade or two. You know, I would say that, you know, the 90s, early 2000s was just, I mean, rock has always been around, but, you know, there was a big boom in rock in the 90s and 2000s. And then somewhere in the 2000s, electronic music started to kind of weave its way into a lot of different genres and we get what we have today. And I do find that there is this interest amongst producers, young kids across different genres in rock all over again. And you can see it in hip hop, you can see it in EDM. There's a lot of little riffs starting to come in, a lot of like aggressive riffs that are coming from the rock world. And so speaking from like computers and how some things are programmed and stuff, do you feel like rock music is evolving in a good way where maybe you can implement both like the program side of stuff, which is like more computer stuff, and still keep this like live element to it that a lot of people like and find a way to bridge both of them? Is that a good thing in your eyes? Do you think there's any way to stop it or whatever? Because I do feel like that's happening. I don't know, but I'm curious what you think and your perspective on that.
No, yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's a really good time for rock music, man. At least I think you're totally right. Like the past few years, it's definitely had an upswing. There's no doubt, I think. And I think a lot of it has to do with like, at least for guitar, like guitar is really popular right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just social media. It's like there's you can spend your whole day looking through your phone of like just amazing guitar player after amazing guitar player you've never heard of. You're like, this is insane. This is so cool, you know? So like for me, I find it really inspiring because it's like you can never get bored. You can always find new stuff. But no, that it is interesting, man. Like you see rock music kind of like dipping into other genres, you know? Like somebody was telling me the other day, like Miley Cyrus's new album's like pretty rock heavy, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Like or a little bit, or like she tried to do more of like a rock thing. Like I know like Billy Idol's on it and Joan Jett and shit. But that's cool, you know? It's like if it's interesting, you know? It's like how trends change and all that, but yeah, I don't know. As far as like just like how rock bands record, though, I think there's definitely like a shift back to more like the old school way we were just talking about, where it's like you jam the songs, you record it live. You know, like that's kind of becoming cool again, as opposed to like I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago, the way they recorded that stuff was a little bit different. But yeah. I think it's a good thing, man. It's like it's going back to more like the classic rock approach, at least for recording.
Excuse me. Yeah, I do a lot of work in the EDM scene, and there is this massive interest that's kind of come out of nowhere for live stuff, like not just like music in general, but there's this massive interest in trying to figure out what is this whole live band essence. Like I'm not saying that is what's going to take over that genre specifically, but I do see that because electronic music was new-ish. I mean, electronic music has been around since like the 70s, but it took over in the 2000s. And I think it's, even though there's a place for it and people love it, there is this brand new interest in like the live band atmosphere. I mean, Post Malone did that live performance in Texas, you know, with like country music, which was really, really dope. And I do find that there is this interest from a lot of musicians that you wouldn't ever think about are starting to kind of be like, hey, what's this whole guitar thing about? I kind of want to learn how to play piano. I kind of want to learn how to play this and implement in some way. So I don't know. I guess I'm sort of speculating, and I'm seeing that there is going to be more of let me explain it this way. Hip hop, for example, was very much its own genre 10, 15 years ago. And then ever since the mid 2000s, it fused itself into pop and electronic music. So now when you listen to like trap or hip hop, a lot of it kind of crosses genres and it can kind of be considered pop. I think that rock is somewhat next a little bit. Not saying that rock never was pop, but I feel like it's starting to creep in where you're going to hear it in a lot of things that you never would have ever thought of hearing, if that makes sense. And obviously I'm just pulling this out of my ass, but that's at least where I'm feeling. And I'm curious, has that ever interested you in implementing in some of your music, doing something like that? Or you're kind of sticking to your own style?
No, that's something I definitely love to do, you know, like especially with like a lot of the riffs and music that I write on a guitar, like it doesn't always have to be, you know, the band slamming away behind it. You know, I think that would be really interesting is for me, like, I feel like I would want to collaborate with somebody, you know, like I don't know if I could make an EDM track by myself. It would probably be terrible, but you know, if you find somebody that you really dig their music, you know, and it's like, hey, check out this riff, maybe we can, you know, that's the beautiful thing of now is all it takes is sending somebody a message. You can pretty much get a hold of anybody now, you know, just through Instagram or whatever. It's like, if you dig somebody's music, reach out to them and tell them, you know, because you never know. It's like, it's amazing how some of that stuff works. But no, I'd love to, I'd love to, you know, kind of branch out and play on some other stuff. I worked as like a studio guitar player a lot, especially during the pandemic where, you know, I've been home. So I end up playing on like a lot of different records, but I'd love to like write music in other genres as well.
Yeah. You should check out this guy called Sullivan King. He is very...
Okay, yeah, I'll write it down.
Yeah, he's very big in the EDM scene. He's working with Hopeless Records now because he is essentially a very good guitarist, just a very fantastic, aggressive rock guitarist who fused guitar with EDM at a time where that wasn't being done. Now it's kind of becoming a thing, but pretty he was one of the first. Yeah, now he was one of the first people to do it. Like he screams on his tracks, like it's crazy. And he found that niche of like doing rock guitar with EDM, and now because he's gotten so big, he's kind of branching off into other genres. And so I think that's something you would probably like, and anyone out there who's like interested in like rock and roll and wants like a segue in how to like get into other genres, that's actually a really good guy to check out. So shout out to Sullivan King. But I do appreciate you being so open-minded with some of this stuff. I know that we're kind of reaching the time limit here. Are you okay if we go for another like 5-10 minutes? Is that cool?
Oh yeah, I'm not in a rush, man. Yeah, that's cool.
Excellent. I love it. And I love that wall behind you. I was going to ask you about that in a little bit, but I'm curious, since you are working as a studio musician in Detroit, which is very legendary city for rock and roll. I'm curious, prior to the pandemic, and maybe even now, is the rock and roll still alive and thriving in the rock and roll scene? Is that alive and thriving in Detroit as it used to be?
Yeah. There's a lot of amazing bands here, man. It's interesting. The Detroit music scene now is like really eclectic. Like as far as like I feel really lucky because the studio I work at, it's like, it's not just one genre. It's a lot of different types of musicians come through. So it's like, there's been some amazing rock bands that have come through. I end up playing on like a lot of singer-songwriter stuff a lot, which I love. That's like what I mainly listen to. As far as like new music, like I love a lot of like newer singer-songwriters. So that's fun for me. It's like kind of a fun challenge to try and take the way you play and make it fit in different, you know, kind of like carve out your own place in other types of music that maybe you wouldn't normally play on a gig or something. But yeah, it's a great rock scene, man. There's a lot of good bands, and I'm most of the venues. I'm really glad like most of the venues got saved through the recent bailout or whatever. So there's not a lot closing. I know like LA got hit really hard, New York got hit really hard, but
yeah,
there's a lot of good places to play as well. So it's fun. I love Detroit, man. It's a great music town and a great place to grow up learning how to play.
Yeah, Detroit seems like it would be a really fun city to grow up in and to learn music. It is interesting. I don't feel like LA or New York are going to be the same musically after this whole thing. I mean, they're still very much the same entertainment towns that they were before. But I do feel like with some of the venue closures, and although there haven't been that many in LA that we would have been worried about, but there's definitely a couple. I do feel like things will be different, but I'm excited for them to get back up. And I don't know. Anyways, I digress. I do appreciate your time, Sammy, because you are a very intellectual dude. You do a lot of really cool stuff, and I appreciate your honesty when it comes to a lot of these topics, because this is how we grow as human beings and as musicians. I think being able to share different ideas and explore some deeper topics so that even if it doesn't resonate with everybody, I know for a fact, and especially speaking as for myself, you just need one person to be able to get that information and it can change their life and they can become legends in the future, you know? So I always appreciate when someone is honest and open and sharing their ideas, because I think that's super important, Sammy. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's really nice to meet you. This is a great podcast. So yeah, it really means a lot. You taking the time to talk to me, man.
Of course, man. No, I love what you're about. And so before I let you go, why don't you give me the rundown of what you've got going on? I know you've been talking about the second album. We've been talking about some potential performances. Let me know, like, what is the name of your album? Maybe some singles are out. Maybe you have some performances lined up. Maybe you can chime in a little bit on the songs that you've been working on as a studio guitarist. I don't know, whatever you want. Let me know.
Yeah. So right now I'm working on my second instrumental record. That's kind of been my main focus. I'm still writing it. Like, we haven't really started recording it yet, but I just put out one single that's going to be on it, called Ritual Lights. So that's my newest song that just came out
Nice.
about a month ago now. But the main thing, man, is like we're starting to go back on the road. Like I'm announcing some dates. We're going out in October, so I'm going to get to play some of the stuff live for the first time, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, those dates are coming out in a few weeks, and then like I mentioned, I started this new band called Pharaohs. With this amazing singer named Cam Clark. And our first show is going to be in Nashville in July. So
Nice.
If anybody's in Nashville, I'm so excited to it's always exciting, like when you're in a new band, it's your first show. It's like, because you don't know until you do it. So that's kind of what I've been working on. That's kind of my main plans coming up here.
Hell yeah, man. Well, if I'm in Nashville, I'll make sure to drop in just to visit the band for a little bit. I think it's going to be fun. Nashville's such a great town to play in too. But anyway, Sammy, I don't want to take your time too much. I do appreciate it, and I already said it, but you're a really cool dude, very smart guy. Love the hair, love the guitar wall. Everything about you is pretty cool, man. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
Really appreciate it. So nice to meet you, Eddie.